A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. I'm Lieutenant Colonel retired Muhammad Javed Khan from the Department of Education, Sarhad University of Science and Information Technology, Peshawar. Dear students, we are going to deliver a lecture in the continuation of the subject Curriculum Development and Implementation. Earlier, in this very subject, we discussed and taught about what is basically knowledge, learning, and education. We talked in detail about various aspects of the subject. Then we came to the foundation of curriculum development, in which we studied the philosophical development and later the historical development of curriculum. Today, in this class, we will be discussing about the psychological foundation of curriculum development. What is the role and significance of psychology in developing curriculum? Why it should be implemented? Why it should be consulted while we are developing a curriculum? Dear students, before we start off our lecture, we would like to revise our previous lesson, and we would just refresh our knowledge that what is curriculum, what we mean by curriculum. Curriculum, as discussed earlier, is the pathway towards achieving educational objectives. Dear students, we discussed that without objectives and without aims and without any mission, there cannot be any curriculum. So the whole process of education desires that there should be an objective which should be set, towards which a struggle should be made, and towards which we move for achieving that objective. So curriculum is basically that very pathway. It is not in itself the objective, rather it is the achieving of the objective and choosing the path and choosing the way which is going to lead to that objective. So curriculum is basically the process. It is planned, it is executed well, and it leads to achieve our aim. Curriculum development is the process of assessing the needs, formulating objectives, and developing instructional objectives and evaluation. When we talk of curriculum development, it is basically the process through which we achieve the educational objective by means of first assessing the needs, that what are the needs of the students, what are the needs of the education, and then for that very purpose we formulate objectives. So when we talk of curriculum and when we talk of education, the foremost thing which comes to our mind, that is the aim and objective. Without objective, there cannot be a curriculum and there cannot be the process of education. So it is very important to know our objectives, to formulate them, and to formulate them in a very calculated manner, so that we are very sure what we want to achieve and what is basically required of the education. So if we are clear in our objectives, we know what we want to achieve, and we are futuristic in our objective. That is, we know that after passing a particular period of years, what basically we want to achieve. Whether at that time we would be relevant or irrelevant. So it also depends upon the formulation while making the objectives. So it is again stressed that the goals, aims, and objective have a very prominent position in the whole curriculum development process. Once we have formulated objective, then accordingly we plan our instructional objectives, that for achieving an objective, what methodology we should adopt, what instructional method is required to achieve those objectives. Maybe one type of instructional objective we have determined may not be able to achieve our educational objective. It may miss the target. So we are going to make it sure that our instructional objectives meet basically the objectives of the curriculum and the objectives of the education. Similarly, yet another component of curriculum development is evaluation. Whenever we talk of education and whenever we talk of curriculum, so as we discussed earlier, that objectives are important, but at the same time, the end result that is called the evaluation and assessment is again very important. There cannot be any education process in which there is no assessment or there is no evaluation. So evaluation determines whatever has been taught, whether we are successful in achieving our goals, aims and objective or not. So this is the most important factor which tells us that whether we are achieving the objective or we are falling short of it. Curriculum development is the process of creating planned curriculum, pedagogy, instruction and presentation mode. Dear students, it is again a very important definition. Curriculum development, as we said, that it is a process. It is a process of creating planned curriculum. So curriculum is always planned. So curriculum cannot be without proper planning and without proper objectives which are to be achieved. We plan which way to adopt, what instructional material we are going to suggest in the textbook, and what methodology we are going to adopt, and finally what should be the evaluation and assessment method. So these are the basic factors which are important while we are considering the curriculum development process. Dear students, we discussed the philosophical foundation of curriculum development in our previous classes. Basically, first of all, we must know what is philosophy. Philosophy is called the mother of all knowledge and learning. Once there was no specification that what all subjects are to be taught to students or what all subjects should be there in the preview of knowledge, so everything came under philosophy. Once we look at the old Greek times, we find out that anybody who was knowledgeable and who was learned, he used to be called as a philosopher, whether he was a mathematician, whether he was an astrologer, and at times these all subjects were confined in one person because knowledge and its scope was very limited and it could come into the purview of one individual person. But as time progressed, subjects developed, knowledge, the horizon of the knowledge increased. It demanded that knowledge should be labeled, categorized and classified into various subjects and topics. So for this purpose, the education was broadly divided into arts and sciences, and then again among the arts and the sciences we have various types of subjects. Today, the scope of subjects has increased a lot, whether it is medical sciences, whether it is science or agriculture or any other subject. We see, for example, among the social sciences, there are numerous subjects. So the scope has increased a lot. So philosophy is now itself a subject. Philosophy is now related and confined to what we logically think, the process through which we want to achieve the reality of the things. We want to know the truth by logical reasoning, by logical understanding of the situation and events. So anything which is related to the mental process we call it as philosophy. We need not to experiment or observe things in that. It is unlike science, and it is also unlike religion, where we start believing. But in philosophy, we don't believe, we ask a question and we try to logically answer it. So philosophy is the pursuit of wisdom and knowledge. In short, we can very well say that it is all wisdom and knowledge. So once we talk anything about wisdom and knowledge of a subject, so that comes in the purview of philosophy. Philosophy is an unending search for truth and reality. So the realities and the truths of this universe, of our life, are hidden from us. And we try to know and to come to the reality. So reaching the truth is our main aim. For this purpose, we must adopt a proper way how to reach to that truth. So we also discussed that religion believes by reaching the truth through belief, whereas science reaches the truth by believing in experimentation and observation, and it strongly believes in the five senses of the humans, which is going to give him the reality of the things. Whereas in philosophy, we believe in logic and in the reasonable conclusion of things. So it is all about wisdom and knowledge. It is the study of realities and general principles. It is concerned with eternal reality and general principles of life. We also discussed that the four general philosophies are philosophy of idealism, philosophy of realism, philosophy of pragmatism, and the philosophy of existentialism. The four educational philosophies, which are perennialism, progressivism, essentialism, and reconstructionism. The three main branches of philosophy are ontology, epistemology, and axiology. Ontology basically discusses the existence of everything. It discusses the existence of the humanity, the existence related to the universe, and the existence related to the creator. So in ontology, very fundamental questions are raised, that why we are here on this earth, where we will go, and what is the purpose we are spending life over here. So it relates to the very existence of the humanity, of the creator, and the universe. We talk of the matter in the universe, that why is it there, from where it came, and what is going to become of it. Then we come to epistemology. Epistemology is the philosophy which is related to educational. So educational philosophy, the value of education in philosophy is epistemology. The third branch of philosophy is axiology. In axiology, we discuss values, morality, and ethics. So axiology is the norms and the behavior which is being adopted, that refers to axiology. Axiology has two further branches. One is logic and the other is related to aesthetics. Now, what is the significance of philosophy in curriculum development? Curriculum decisions involve a wide range of consideration that on several issues in education. Dear students, first of all, once we develop a curriculum for a particular people, for a particular nation or a particular society, we must know the individuals, their customs, their traditions, their societal norms, how they behave and how they look at the things. What is their worldview about things? So every society has its own peculiar environment. It has got its own peculiar beliefs, customs, and traditions. Based on these, they look at the affairs of the world, they look at the human interaction, and so many other things. When it comes to education, so they do keep a view about education and learning and knowledge. So any society, rather every society, has its own particular environment, circumstances, and their view of education. So as the societies and the cultures differ, similarly the approach towards education also differs. So curriculum is always bound to particular cultures and societies, their beliefs in lives, and how they look at the things. So philosophy is basically, as we talked about the four philosophies, the general philosophies, that is realism, idealism, pragmatism, and existentialism. So what is the consideration among the curriculum or among the people of the society related to the place they give to the religion, the place they give to science, their belief in the individual existence, in the belief that how much individual is free, he has got the freedom, and how the things of the world are going. So any community having or any society having their own view would determine is going to be included in the objectives of the curriculum. So hence the philosophy of life which people have, which the society has, which they practice, which they believe in, basically penetrates into the curriculum. So once we decide what type of curriculum it should be, we must know the consideration of the society, their strong belief in the in their own philosophy, and similarly the curriculum, the philosophy of life must be dictated in the curriculum and the educational objectives. So this is the importance or the connection which is related to the philosophy with the curriculum. These issues include the purpose of learning, that why we are making people learned, educated, sources of the subject matter, if it is the outlook or the view of life is related to any religion, then the religion would dictate about the subject matter, the nature of teaching, learning process, that how it is going to be held, what types of methodology, what type of processes are being preferred over the others. Similarly, the characteristics of the learner and many more other things. These decisions are based on fundamental beliefs of a person's philosophy of education. Whatever we discussed earlier, so once we decide that what is the purpose of learning, so it is going to be dictated by our belief in our life, our belief of our customs of our society, our belief in our religion, whatever we think learning should be like, so it is going to be included in the curriculum. So we cannot alienate the curriculum from the society or from the purpose of the philosophical purpose of the society. So philosophy plays a very important and vital role in the progress and development of curriculum. This is what made it possible for philosophy to be viewed or taken as one of the foundation of curriculum. These are those points which relate and which link philosophy with the curriculum, and that's why the philosophy has attained the very first priority in making the foundation curriculum, because it is going to determine the nature of the curriculum, what type of nature it should have. Dear student, after throwing light on the philosophical foundation of curriculum development, we discussed the historical foundation of curriculum. As we know, history plays a very important role in our lives. We cannot be isolated from our previous life. So our past is interwoven with our present and with our future life. The past provides us sufficient ground to determine and to analyze the affairs of the present, and it gives us a chance to predict future events. So past is very important, and it provides the very basic foundation for education. The historical foundation of education refers to those influences on the curriculum that are derived from the developments in the past. They form the basis for decision making and systematic growth of the education system. Historical foundation of education refer to those events, ideas, and institutions and organizations that have shaped or have contributed to shaping the present day education. As we said, that historical foundation is very important in the development of curriculum, and history basically shapes our events, ideas, and organization. Whatever we are today, we are because of what we and how we developed in our past. So those developments were gradual, that were in a proper sequential order, and this led us to our today's place in the society, in the world. Our study of the history of education begins with the creation of mankind on earth. Once we talk about the historical foundation of the past of the humanity, we start from the point where the human or the mankind was created on this earth. First, we talk about the prehistoric man, then about the ancient civilization. The prehistoric man, as we know, was living very close to the nature. He was living in the nature. He was living in the plants and the animals and in the stones and the mountains and the deserts. He was a product of nature, and there was no artificiality over there. He had no clothes. He had no built houses, and his ways were very simplistic. He just woke up in the morning in search of food, and secondly, he tried to save himself from the beasts of the jungle, and also from the harshness of the weather and climate. So the life of the prehistoric man was very simple. As time passed, humans developed families, and this family became the basic unit for the makeup of the society. So family consisted of very closely of husband and wife and their siblings. So the family was the basic unit, and the elders of the family had only one thing upon their mind, and that was to provide sustenance and food to their family members, and secondly, to provide them a very safe and secure environment in which they can progress and develop and live happily. So he chose places which were away from the, which were safe from the animals, which could provide him shelter from the floods, from heat and from the cold environment. His only aim or objective in life was so somehow to be safe from the animals and at the same time from the environment. Then as time passed, the families grouped together and form a larger group, and these groups were basically formed where all the people, all the individuals were from the same bloodline. They were relatives, and somehow they lived together. They thought it wise that being near to each other, by being helping to each other, they are going to defeat not only the natural circumstances but also defeat other groups who are in a competition with them. Once these groups enlarged, so it grew up in tribal system. So the tribal system were the people who were living in different groups but having something in common. That things which were in common were that one, they were from these single ancestors. Their blood lineage was there. They belonged to the same group of people. Secondly, they shared the same language. Then they also had the same ways of doing things. They had similar traditions and cultures. This built up the tribal system. And then they wanted to save and safeguard the tribe from the other tribes. If there were wars or if there were interests which had conflict, so they were able to defend themselves very well. Life in the prehistoric time was mostly nomadic, that the humans in the form of groups and families moved from one place to the other. But there were people who thought it wise to settle at one particular place instead. And this was possible because once humans started living besides rivers, and over there they wanted to establish agriculture, domesticate animals, and they want to build proper houses for themselves. It was the time where the humans believed that they should settle at one place, because once they were nomadic, once they were moving from one place to the other, what determined their movement was basically the food security, the security for the water sources, security for the grasses and the animals, which is going to secure their life and provide them with food. But once the food was being given by the fields, and once the agriculture was adopted, so its foremost requirement was that land cannot be moved from one place to another. So therefore, the people preferred a settled life. So this was the life of the prehistoric man, whether it was nomadic or settled. It was basically, his concern was to protect himself, to secure the persistency and the consistency of supply of food to himself and his family, and thirdly, being a social animal. So the humans have the tendency to live among each other, necessitated that he should live in the form of society, in the form of group, where they shared common culture, and which necessitated that there should be different professional classes among them, and in this way the classes in the society were evolved. Then from the prehistoric man, we switch over to the ancient civilization. The historical foundation tells us that how humans gradually developed. So once we looked all around us in the caves, we dig the earth, we find out the humans had been living for thousands of years. But for the last 12,000 years, we have evidences, very strong witnesses and very strong proof that how humans were living and how they adopted different cultures, different systems and different ways of life. Dear students, as we turn the pages of history, we come to know that there was a civilization which existed foremost in the very old time, that is 12,000 years ago approximately. This very civilization developed on the river banks of Bolan River in the Bolan Valley near Sibbi in Balochistan. Pakistan has a very unique place in the history of mankind, since the earliest traces of human civilization trace back to Mehergarh civilization. In Mehergarh civilization, the archaeological sites which have been founded, which have been dug and excavated, gave us a very solid proof of how the people in that area lived. In the Mehergarh civilization, there are various phases of Mehergarh which start from Mehergarh 1 till Mehergarh 7 and 8. The time which spent was from the mature form of Mehergarh civilization was from 8000 BC till 1200 BC. So we can roughly estimate that over 6000 years there were people who were living and who had adopted a very modern or a very advanced form of living at that very time. They had settled at a particular place. They had built houses for themselves. They had developed agriculture. They had made various artifacts, and we had collected some 32,000 artifacts from the Mehergarh civilization. Although we couldn't dig down to the various other phases of Mehergarh civilization because they were in a very poor form, and if we go down, so the civilization on the top is going to be removed. So Mehergarh civilization, like other civilization, had given us the progress and development of the humanity, and we come to know how humans were developing themselves. Then we come to the Mesopotamian civilization, which ranges roughly from 8000 to 5000 BC. Mesopotamian civilization, unlike Mehergarh civilization, is very developed, is in a very good form. The ruins and the artifacts found there were in a very better shape, and we can predict many things from that how they were living, and everything is very elaborate and very clear. So Mesopotamia is basically the land between two rivers. The two rivers which run across Iraq are Euphrates and River Tigris. These are those two rivers which boosted four civilization, and the Mesopotamian civilization is basically the name given to the four civilization, the Sumerian civilization, which were developed at a city known as Sumer. Then the Assyrian civilization. Assyrian was the civilization which was to the north of Iraq, that is near Syria. Then the Akkadian civilization, which was on the city Akkad, and then finally the Babylonian civilization, which got developed on the Babylon city. These four civilizations ruled one after another, and they had empowered the whole area, and they ruled the same area, and they had their own ways, very distinct and different ways of living. However, the Sumerian civilization is the most important among them because it is the first civilization which has invented wheel, which has invented fire. They domesticated animals. They had an elaborate system of agriculture. They brought water from the rivers by building barrages, and they dug canals. In this way, they ensured water throughout the year for their fields and their crops. They also were the first who had made tools and various technology which they adopted, whatever that was at that time. They also had their own distinct language, which was called the cuneiferous language. The cuneiferous language is made of cunes. There was education system. They made tablets, and from the Sumerians and the other civilization, we had found and discovered around 4 million tablets. Tablets were basically the clay on which the language was, the cuneiferous language was imprinted, and then they were put to furnaces so as that they become hard and solid. So we had the archaeologists and the language experts had decoded around 30 to 40,000 of the tablets. Among them, the Code of Hammurabi has also been written on some of the tablets, which gave us an insight into these Mesopotamian civilization, how they lived, what was the form of government, what was the place and the role of the king, and what all the king wanted, and how he performed his duties. So everything was written and it is recorded. That's why the Mesopotamian civilization have a unique place among the historical foundation of curriculum, because knowledge among them grow and developed gradually, and this which was passed on to other generation, which resulted in the overall development of humanity. And this was Today, whatever we are, basically we owe it to the various civilization, and particularly to the Mesopotamian civilization. So, as we discussed, that they were the civilization who gave us the art of living to us. They developed towns and cities. They developed proper. They had different classified areas in the town. For example, where to store the water, where the granaries should be, where the priest or the temple should be, and where the ordinary people are going to live. So everything was according to a particular plan and according to a particular system. Similarly, they also developed agriculture. They brought home the animals from the jungle. They domesticated them. They made them pet animals, and they performed various duties for them. For a dog was a faithful animal with them. It was a watchman for them. Similarly, a horse and a donkey, they brought various loads of burden upon them. Cow and buffalo and goats provided them with the hides to cover themselves. They also provide them with milk and meat, and the food was guaranteed to them. Similarly, they also explored some metal, and they also made a few things from them. They also made various tools from the stone also. Soon after the Mesopotamian civilization, there was the Egyptian civilization, which was somehow overlapping with the Mesopotamian civilization. And we also know that the Mesopotamian civilization had trade links with the Egyptian civilization. Egypt was in the west of Iraq, in the west of these two Mesopotamia rivers, the Mesopotamian rivers. Again, Egyptian civilization emerged on the banks of River Nile. River Nile is a very long river, and unlike other rivers, it runs from, in the northern hemisphere, it runs from the south and it ends up in the north in the Mediterranean Sea. So it covers a lot of area. There were regular floodings in the Nile River, which was a source of great contribution for agriculture, because the flooding brought silt, which was very fertile and which ensured good crops for them. And similarly, it brought miseries for them as well. The floods would make the areas marshy, damp, and because of different mosquitoes and different insects would grow, people used to fall ill, and there used to be pandemic and epidemics. So it was the River Nile, and its flooding was at the same time both a very good and wonderful thing, and at the same time it brought miseries to them. They were the people who had elaborate system of governance. There was the king, and his name used to be the pharaohs. Those pharaohs had built the pyramids in Egypt, which are the marvels of the world. We also know that they brought those stones, which they carved them into a particular shape. They brought them to those very places through very hardships and difficult method, and they put them upon each other. It was a very laborious and a very hard and difficult task, but they did it. And this very thing, it shows that they were archaeologically, they were technologically, and they were mentally very alert, and they had developed a lot. They had their own system of language, which was called the pictorial language. The Egyptian contributed humankind in mathematics, astronomy, agriculture, made home of bricks. Trade and commerce was there. They designed buildings, they built pyramids, and they developed the pictorial language. So the Egyptian civilization contributed in its own way, and it further developed whatever already had been developed, invented, and discovered by the Mesopotamian civilization. So Egyptian civilization is basically a hallmark in the history of humankind, how it progressed and improved its life and the system of doing things. After the Egyptian civilization, we had the Chinese civilization. At that very area, Confucius was the great man, the philosopher, who gave a lot of educational knowledge to his society, to his men. Till today, Confucius is considered to be a sage, an important person, and they put his theories in the way of governing their country. So the Chinese also were highly developed. They were the only nation at that time who had invented paper, and they also knew how to do printing. So they contributed a lot towards knowledge and learning through inventing paper and books and printing. They had also improved in the herbal medicines, and so a lot of contribution could also be traced back to the Chinese civilization. Then we come over to the Indus Valley civilization, which was between the time that is 3300 BC up till 1300. Indus Valley civilization had its links with the Egyptian civilization and the Mesopotamian civilization. They had trade links. They had import and exports with them. And it all happened through rivers and the sea. So once we look at the Indus Valley civilization, the humans over here had a very developed form of living. We see it in the ruins of Mohenjo-daro and in the ruins of Harappa and Kot Diji. They had an elaborate system of agriculture, of their caste system, of the professions which were being assigned to different people, and at the same time they were very good in making bricks, in building houses, and they had temples. So it was a knowledgeable society. Their basic contribution was in mathematics. Arithmetic was their strength, astrology was their strength, and religion was also their strength. We see from the diggings in Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, they had their own seals. The kings and the queens, they ruled for a long time. There was a proper system of government. So the Indus Valley had again a lot of contribution towards the humanity. They further developed upon the canals, agriculture, trade, and the various other making of pottery and tools. So we can say that this is yet another step in the progress and in the journey of humanity. With the Indus Valley civilization, we come to the European area, where we find the Greek civilization, which lasted from 2500 BC till 200 BC. Around 500 BC, we see its very mature form, and over there we see that knowledge and learning was the basic epitome of that very society. They built their society upon knowledge and learning and education. They preferred people mostly to be philosophers. They listened well. They were accommodative of the new ideas. And the Greek civilization, we find their books which are intact. A lot of mathematical works, work in astrology, in the form of government, in the art of wars. They developed a lot, and they contributed towards the modern society. Whatever we are today, the Western society particularly and the world at large, its development could be traced back to the Greek civilization. There were people like Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and Alexander the Great, beyond many others who had been working in different other fields of science and arts and religion. So Greek civilization have very lasting impact. They had also its influence in arts, in architecture, in poetry, and in literature. We see, once we look towards their religion were made of several gods and the goddesses. They had the main god Zeus, who lived on Mount Olympus. He had 12 other major gods, and similarly for every event, for everything, they had their own god. For example, the god Apollo was the one who brought out the sun from the darkness and charioted it to the sky's horizon for night. Similarly, there was the god Muse, who had been the god of poetry, goddess Cupid. She had been the one who was involved in the pangs and the pains and the beauties of love. She had arrows with her, and wherever she wanted, anybody she wanted to afflict with love, she would throw an arrow across his heart. Similarly, Mammon was the one who was related with treasury and with wealth. So they had an elaborate system of gods and goddesses, and they believed in them. They developed various legends and myths around them. There had been the people who had developed long stories in the form of epics, the Homerian epic. So once we look at the life spent at the Greek civilization, the period had contributed in all forms of science and arts, and their contribution is very huge. Even till today, we refer back to Plato, Aristotle, and Socrates for various things. And their print is very permanent. We see their ideas which had a very permanent role in our present day life. They developed mathematics, medical science, astronomy. They founded art and science. They were great orators. The modern Western education is basically derived from the Greek system of education. And we also know that basically the Greek civilization they were the people who were the great lovers of knowledge. With this, by 200 BC, the Greek civilization weakened and the Hellenistic area started. Hellenism was the time once after Alexander the Great, the area which he has conquered, they came under the rule of different people and they belonged to Greeks. Similarly, it lasted for a few hundred years, but by 200 years, the Roman civilization was taking its shape, and by 100 BC, it had complete dominance over the areas in Europe and in the Asia, and particularly in Asia Minor, that we call Turkey. So the Roman civilization had two parts. One was the Roman civilization, which was directly under the rule and control of the Roman king that was in Europe. But the area which was outside Europe, that is in the Asia, which included Asia Minor, that is Turkey, Syria, Jordan, Iraq, and a few other places, which includes Palestine. So these 4 or 5 countries were the rule of the Roman civilization, which was called as the Byzantine Empire. So Byzantine king or emperor used to be nominated by the Roman king in Italy. They were the masters in the arts of government, law, and military organization. So whatever law we have today, whatever government we have, are the very structure and the setup of the military organization. We all owe it to the Romans. Another very important aspect which must be attributed to the Roman civilization is that they took all the knowledge of the Greeks and they adopted it in their civilization. They built their civilization on the knowledge by the Greek civilization. So basically, Roman civilization, rather the Greek civilization, greatly contributed to the building of the Roman civilization. Dear students, as we talked that the Byzantine Empire of the Roman civilization, it extended from Turkey to Palestine, Jordan, Iraq, and Syria. So beneath Syria and Jordan, there was Arabia, Saudi Arabia, which we call today. So the Arab Peninsula was at that time around 700 to 1250 AD was being ruled by the Muslims. Once the Muslim had conquered the whole of Arabia, in the lifetime of the first caliphate, they tried to move beyond the limits of Arabia. So they pushed towards Jordan and Syria, where the Byzantinians, the Romans, were having their powerful base. So the Muslims were the one who defeated the Byzantine Empire. They took them out of their roots in these countries like Palestine, Syria and Jordan and Turkey. So the Muslims completely defeated them, and they ruled from now onward those very areas which were ruled by the Byzantine Roman Empire. So Turkey, Palestine, Jordan, Iraq, Syria, Arab with its capital that is in Baghdad, Constantinople and Cairo, that became the Abbasid rule was established there. So the second chapter of the Muslims were the Umayyad rule, and it ruled in Spain and Morocco, and it was from 711 till 492 AD. And their rule was in the major cities of Cordoba, Andalusia and Granada. The Muslims, whether they were the Abbasides in Baghdad, Constantinople and Cairo, or whether they were the Muslims, the Umayyad, who were ruling in Cordoba, Andalusia, Granada in Spain and Morocco, they had contributed largely towards the knowledge in physics, chemistry, medical science, mathematics, philosophy, astronomy, etc. They produced men like Ibn Sina, Ibn al-Haytham, Jabir bin Hayyan, etc. The Muslim rules came to an end after 1250 AD because the invasions which were made by the grandsons of Genghis Khan, the Mongols, and they completely banished them and vanished them from the Muslim world, and the Muslim rule at that time came to an end. Dear students, the historical foundation, the civilization which we study, as we gradually started from Mehergal, Mesopotamia, the Chinese civilization, the Egyptian civilization, the Indus Valley civilization, and we came to the Greek and the Romans. Now the Roman civilization spilled over to the Muslim civilization. And then from the Muslim, around 1500 AD onward, the roots of the modern civilization were taking place, and from that onward we see the modern civilization is basically the civilization which is being propagated by the Western countries. So this is how the historical foundation of education and the historical foundation of curriculum takes its shape. Once we look at the historical foundation, we must trace back our history, and we must see the gradual development of how the history can contribute to curriculum. History plays an important message to convey about experiences of the contemporary career and provides a meaningful perspective to the curriculum developer. Curriculum as we know it today has evolved over the years from a narrow set of disjointed parts to a comprehensive array of relevant student learning experiences. We are going to discuss this topic, the psychological foundation of curriculum development. Basically, as we know that humans are different from the rest of the animals in only one aspect, and that aspect is particularly the aspect of learning, knowledge, creating ideas, and the ability to think. This ability to think makes us different from the other or the rest of the animals. Psychology is basically the scientific study of mental functions and behavior, including human perceptions, human cognition, that is the thinking process, behaviors, emotions, personality, and the interpersonal relationship among each other. So psychology basically is related, educational psychology is related to learning of knowledge. Learning takes place in the mind, and mind has mental process which generates our ideas and gives us thinking, thoughts and ideas. What we discussed was that psychology is the mental function about the mental process and our behaviors and attitude, which includes, as we discussed, perception, cognition, behavior, emotion, personality, and at large the interpersonal relationship. What is the psychological basis of curriculum? Education is for the child. The child is the center of the educational process. Through education, efforts are made for bringing desirable changes in the behavior of the learners. So learning and education are aimed at one purpose, and that purpose is to bring a change in the behavior of the individual learner. Psychology as a science of behavior is linked with the process of imparting knowledge. Since psychology is related to behavior, and it tells us that how knowledge should be given to children, how learning in the mind of the child takes place. So that is the most important foundation of curriculum, since we are concerned with the learning of the child. So therefore psychology is the one which is closely related to learning. Therefore it has its great impact upon curriculum. Psychology helps curriculum developers in deciding what content and learning experiences can be included in the curriculum according to the stage and the level and the growth of the child. So curriculum determines what content should be adopted, and it is based on the psychological aspect as well. That what psychology tells us that what what content should be included in the curriculum. It is based on the learning experiences of the child, knowing the child ability, how he learns and how develops his thinking. Curriculum is developed according to child age, level and needs. Dear student, ये बात इधर बहुत वाज़े है और बहुत इम्पॉर्टेंट है कि साइकोलॉजी ही हमें बताती है कि बच्चे की उम्र किस उम्र में बच्चे को क्या सिखाना चाहिए और क्लास के किस लेवल पे वो पहुँचे तो उस लेवल पे वो आगे क्या सीखे. तो करिकुलम इज़ अ ग्रेजुअल डेवलपमेंट ऑफ नॉलेज एंड लर्निंग. सिमिलरली साइकोलॉजी जो है वो बच्चे की ग्रोथ और डेवलपमेंट के हिसाब से उसकी जहनी नशोनुमा, उसकी फ़िज़िकल और इमोशनल वेलबींग के हिसाब से हमें ये बताती है कि किस उम्र में किस लेवल पे बच्चों की क्या नीड्स होती हैं, क्या ज़रूरतें होती हैं और जिनको हम करिकुलम में शामिल करके उससे बेहतर नताइज हासिल कर सकते हैं. अगर हमारे पास साइकोलॉजी का इल्म ना हो तो हम इस बात से कासिर रह जाएंगे कि हम क्या शामिल करें, क्या शामिल ना करें, किस हद तक शामिल करें और किस लेवल तक जो है चीज़ों को करिकुलम में अडॉप्ट करें. लिहाजा साइकोलॉजी की करिकुलम डेवलपमेंट के अंदर बहुत ही अहम रोल है और बहुत ही प्रैक्टिकल जो एस्पेक्ट है दैट इज़ बीइंग कवर्ड बाय साइकोलॉजी. Psychology necessitates curriculum should have variety and elasticity to allow individual differences, need and interest. मौजूदा दौर में साइकोलॉजी ने एज अ साइंस बहुत ज़्यादा तरक्की की है. इसने हमें वो साइंटिफिक तरीके रिसर्च के ज़रिए बताए कि इंसानी जहन कैसे ग्रो करता है, आइडियाज़ कैसे फार्मूलेट होती हैं और उसके दिमाग के अंदर सोच कैसे आती है. लिहाजा इन चीज़ों को देखते हुए हमें पता चला है कि हर इंसान दूसरे इंसान से अपने जहनी एतबार से मुख्तलिफ होता है, उसकी सोच मुख्तलिफ होती है, उसकी जो है इंटरेस्ट मुख्तलिफ होते हैं और हर बच्चे की नीड्स मुख्तलिफ होती हैं. बज़ाहिर एक क्लास में हमें 25-30 जो बच्चे नज़र आते हैं हम उनको एक जैसे तस्वर कर लेते हैं, लेकिन हकीकतन ऑन ग्राउंड एंड इन रियलिटी एंड प्रैक्टिकली एवरी चाइल्ड इज़ डिफरेंट बिकॉज उसकी माइंड का जो साख्त है वो बिल्कुल डिफरेंट है. वो मुख्तलिफ नेटवर्किंग के ज़रिए वो सोचता है और उसकी सोच दूसरों से मुख्तलिफ होती है. और इसकी सोच मुख्तलिफ क्यों होती है? क्योंकि उसके जो माहौल है वो उसको डिक्टेट करता है. उसके घर का माहौल, उसके मिलने जुलने के जो दोस्त हैं, वो जिस स्कूल में जाता है, लोग उसको कैसे समझते हैं, कैसे देखते हैं, वो अपने बारे में क्या समझता है. लिहाजा उसकी एक ख़ास साइकोलॉजी बन जाती है और हर बच्चे की साइकोलॉजी मुख्तलिफ होती है. लिहाजा जो जहन के अंदर लर्निंग प्रोसेस है वो भी मुख्तलिफ है, जो बच्चों की नीड्स और इंटरेस्ट हैं वो भी मुख्तलिफ हैं. तो साइकोलॉजी जो है का काम बहुत मुश्किल है. करिकुलम डेवलपर्स का काम भी बहुत मुश्किल हो जाता है क्योंकि उन्होंने इंडिविजुअल डिफरेंसेस को खातिर में लाके करिकुलम को डेवलप करना है. उन्होंने हर बच्चे के इंडिविजुअल नीड को खातिर में लाके करिकुलम डेवलप करना है. उन्होंने बच्चों के शौक़ और इंटरेस्ट को देख के करिकुलम में उसको शामिल करना है. लिहाजा साइकोलॉजी का रोल जो है वो करिकुलम डेवलपमेंट में बढ़ता जाता है, बहुत अहम है और इम्पॉर्टेंट है. करिकुलम डेवलपमेंट इज़ गाइडेड बाय द आइडियाज़ put forward by psychologists. تو یہ بات ابھی امر ہے کہ جو کریکولم ڈیولپمنٹ کو جو بنیادی گائیڈنس جو دی جاتی ہے وہ سائیکالوجی ہی دیتی ہے. کریکولم ڈیولپمنٹ ہیز سفیشینٹ سائیکولوجیکل بیسس. The psychological foundation provides basis for understanding the teaching learning process. Psychology ہمیں teaching learning کے جو پورا process ہے اس کو scientifically سمجھنے کی ہمیں اہلیت دیتا ہے, ہمیں سمجھنے کی ہم کوشش کرتے ہیں. لہٰذا جب ہم یہ سمجھ جاتے ہیں تو اس کو پھر ہم کریکولم میں شامل کرتے ہیں. Educational psychology deals with how people learn. It emphasizes the need to recognize diversity among learners and that people share certain common characteristics as well. جس طرح ہم نے پہلے بات کی کہ طلباء میں مختلف گروپس ہوتے ہیں جو کہ مختلف طریقے سے لرننگ کرتے ہیں, اور اسی طرح جب ہم ڈائیورسٹی کی بات کرتے ہیں تو ایٹ دا سیم ٹائم بہت سارے اسٹوڈنٹس میں کچھ کامن چیزیں بھی ہوتی ہیں جو کہ ایک جیسے ہوتی ہے. تو ایک بچہ یا گروپ آف اسٹوڈنٹس جو ہوتے ہیں وہ ایٹ دا سیم ٹائم ڈائیورس بھی ہوتے ہیں, وہ heterogeneous بھی ہوتے ہیں, but at the same time they have something at common as well, they are homogeneous as well. تو ان ساری چیزوں کو دیکھ کے سائیکالوجی کریکولم ڈیولپمنٹ میں ہماری مدد کرتی ہے, ہمیں گائیڈ کرتی ہے کہ ہم کس قسم کا کنٹینٹ جو ہے وہ بچوں کے عمر اور ان کے لیول کے حساب سے شامل کریں. In this section, we shall be talking about the major learning theories and their contribution to curriculum development. Psychological foundation of curriculum is concerned with the question how people learn, and curriculum specialists ask how psychology can contribute to the design and delivery of curriculum. It provides a basis for understanding the teaching and learning process. Dear students, you can see on this very diagram that in the center we have curriculum, and the different psychological factors which are contributing towards curriculum development are the psychological foundation of behaviorism, of cognitivism, of constructivism and humanism, which are influencing curriculum development. Dear students, there are three major learning theories کہ بچے وہ کون سی طریقے ہیں جن کے طریقے سے وہ سیکھتے رہتے ہیں. ان میں سے کچھ پرانا طریقہ بھی ہے اور کچھ نئے طریقے ہیں. ان تینوں کو ہم جو ہے تفصیل سے ابھی ڈسکس کریں گے. The major three theories of learning are classified in the following groups. The first learning theory is the behaviorist theories, which deals with various aspects of stimulus response and reinforcement scheme. The second learning theory is cognitive theory, which views the learner in relationship with the total environment. And lastly, we have the theory of humanism. It emphasizes on affective domain of learning. The behaviorism theory of learning is the first theory which studied how learning occurs, was named as behaviorism. جب انسان کی سوچنے کے عمل کو اور سمجھنے کی صلاحیت کو بیہیویرزم کے تھیوری کے تھرو سوچا سمجھا گیا تو اس کو نام بھی بیہیویرزم دیا گیا. Behaviorism claimed and proved that behavior can be modified by changing the environment. Behaviorism جو تھیوری ہے وہ زیادہ منسلک ہے انوائرمنٹ اور ماحول کے ساتھ، اور وہ ہمیں یہ بتاتی ہے کہ انوائرمنٹ ہمیں ڈکٹیٹ کرتا ہے کہ ہم اپنا بیہیویئر کیسے رکھیں. In other words, a learner responds differently to different stimulus. تو اس سے ہمیں اس بات کا پتہ چلتا ہے کہ جو مختلف بچے ہوتے ہیں وہ مختلف رسپانسز کو لے کے مختلف stimulus جو ہے وہ کریٹ کرتے ہیں. It also suggested to intentionally provide a stimulus to create a desirable response. Behavior is a result of conditions in which learning takes place. Behavior جو ہے وہ conditions ہے جس کی وجہ سے جو learning کا process ہے وہ عمل میں آتا ہے. If proper stimuli are provided, behavior can be molded. لہٰذا اگر ہم کلاس روم کے اندر بچوں کو بہتر stimuli provide کریں تو ان کا جو response آئے گا وہ learning کی شکل میں آئے گا، اور وہ response اور وہ جو behavior ہوگا وہ بہتر طریقے سے حاصل ہوگا. It is possible to control learning experiences to create desired learning outcomes. लिहाजा जब हम लर्निंग एक्सपीरियंसेस को कंट्रोल करें, उनको एक ख़ास ट्रेनिंग और एक ख़ास तरीके से अपनाएं, तो हम जो है लर्निंग के डिज़ायरेबल एस्पेक्ट्स को अचीव कर सकते हैं. It is important to reinforce positive behavior to ensure its repetition. Similarly, हम चीज़ों को ड्रिल के ज़रिए, प्रैक्टिस के ज़रिए और बार बार करने से उनके बच्चों के अंदर हम जो है एक डिज़ायरेबल पॉजिटिव बिहेवियर चेंज ला सकते हैं. डियर स्टूडेंट्स, आज के इस लेक्चर में हमने अपने प्रीवियस लेक्चर्स को एक दूसरे के साथ लिंक किया, उनको हमने दोबारा रिवाइज़ किया और हमने तफसील में तकरीबन बात की प्रीवियस जो लेक्चर्स हुए थे, जिसमें हमने फ़िलोसॉफ़िकल फाउंडेशन ऑफ एजुकेशन, द हिस्टोरिकल फाउंडेशन ऑफ करिकुलम डेवलपमेंट, और जो है आज का जो लेक्चर था द साइकोलॉजिकल फाउंडेशन ऑफ करिकुलम के ऊपर, उसमें हमने बात की. जो साइकोलॉजिकल फाउंडेशन ऑफ करिकुलम है, ये अगले लेक्चर में भी चलता रहेगा. इसके ऊपर हम डिटेल में मज़ीद बात करेंगे कि वो क्या नफ्सियाती अवामिल होते हैं जो कि लर्निंग की तरफ जो है वो कंट्रीब्यूट करते हैं और लर्निंग जो है वो उससे बेहतर अंदाज में हो जाती है. जो एजुकेशनल साइकोलॉजी है, इसका बाकायदा एक साइंटिफिक रोल है, ये एक साइंस है. और पहले जो था इंसान को ये पता नहीं था कि लर्निंग किस तरीके से होती है, लेकिन साइंस की जो साइकोलॉजी सब्जेक्ट है, इसने हमें ये बताया कि ह्यूमन माइंड के अंदर क्या प्रोसेसेस चलते हैं, क्या वो तरीक़ेकार हैं जिसके ज़रिए से वो सोच को जन्म देता है और उसकी जो ख़यालात हैं, वो उसकी जो इमेजिनेशन है, उसकी जो क्रिएटिविटी है, उसका जो बिहेवियर है, वो कैसे बढ़ता है, इम्प्रूव होता है और प्रोग्रेस करता है. तो लिहाजा जो साइकोलॉजिकल फाउंडेशन है, इसका एजुकेशन के अंदर, करिकुलम के अंदर और टीचिंग प्रोसेस के अंदर बहुत ही नुमाया रोल है. इसके रोल को हम हर वक्त जो है उसमें मज़ीद जो है नए रिसर्च के ज़रिए उसमें इजाफ़ा होता रहता है. विद दिस students, we come to the conclusion of our today's lecture. Thank you very much.